We are to analyze the novel Americanah, written by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. So first, we'll just give a brief introduction to the author. So Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, she was born September 15th, 1977, and she's a Nigerian writer of novels, short stories, and nonfiction. She was born in the city of Nguru, Nigeria, and she grew up as the fifth of six children in an Igbo family in the university town of Nsukka in Nguru State. She studied medicine and pharmacy at the University of Nigeria for a year and a half. At the age of 19, she left Nigeria for the United States to study communication and political science at Drexel University in Philadelphia. Moving on to the analysis and the actual setting of the novel. Well, the story takes place in a hair salon in Princeton, in New Jersey. On the psychological environment, it's quiet, abiding air of earned grace and the lack of smell that the narrator describes. When she is at the salon, the physical environment is also described as a stuffy room. At the salon, it's clear to see that it's a working class environment. An example could be that the employee said that the air conditioner broke when I family knows that it's been broken for years, which represents a stereotypical environment in kind of a ghetto. Moving on to the characters, well, Ifemelu, who is the novel's main protagonist, is an intelligent, stubborn, and outspoken Nigerian woman who moves to America to attend university. She has difficulty adjusting there, but eventually becomes a citizen, wins a fellowship at Princeton, and starts a popular blog about race. She has periods of deep depression at times, and she often feels like an outsider. She has two serious boyfriends, Obisine and Blaine, and in part of Ifemelu's character and identity is sort of a restlessness and dissatisfaction, a desire to know herself better and explore every option in her cultural formation.
Moving on to the composition of the novel. So the novel starts in medias res, which is a short description of the environment the character Ifemelu is in, and hence her perception of this. In the beginning of the novel, the events are described chronologically. However, this quickly takes a turn, and a substantial part of the story is a flashback of her life as an American citizen during the preceding 13 years of her stay in the country. During the novel, it alters between the events happening in present time and in the past, which works its way up to an inner discussion in regards to why she has decided to leave America in favor of going back to Nigeria. We, as readers, never resolve why she decides to go back, since the character herself does not have a concrete answer to the question. Yet, she indicates a certain feeling of incongruousness and deviation from the average American, which might have created the foundation for her decision to leave. Since we are solely working with the first part of the novel, the ending is still uncertain.
Moving on to the point of view and the narrator. Well, the narrator is a third-person narrator that tells the story from the point of view of the main character, Ifemelu. As the narrator tells the story through Ifemelu, the narrator is non-omniscient, and it seems that the narrator only has the knowledge of the main character's thoughts. Because of the narrative description being a stream of consciousness from Ifemelu's mind, it is her opinion. She's very critical to the society, as we can tell from the blog that she's writing, since she takes everyday life observations and discusses the issues. On page 5, line 10 to 19, the narrator describes a meet with a man on an airplane where Ifemelu's prejudices are conveyed. Later on the text, the narrator then describes how Ifemelu changed her mind about the man and that he actually had some good points. Overall, this shows us that even Ifemelu has prejudice, but she's open for changes. The characters are mainly directly described by the narrator, as the narrator describes the stream of thoughts of Ifemelu. This we can see an example of on page 5, line 10 to 19, as she describes one of the people that she's met throughout her life. The man she met is then furtherly described indirectly by the things he say, as he turns out not to be the same type of person as Ifemelu had described. Now, looking at the language of the novel, the narrator surely uses informal language, however, with some formal words that indicate a somewhat high style in the choice of words and reflect the character's educational level. Moreover, the author utilizes colloquial writing as dialogues are present in the novel. The language is particularly descriptive as the narrator uses many adjectives to describe and convey the surroundings. It's also noticeable that Ifemelu's sociolite indicates that she belongs to the American society when examining her language. She's gone to Princeton, she has her own blog, she's lived in the United States for 13 years, and her boyfriend Blaine is African American. So this information combined has had an impact on Ifemelu's sociolect, which differentiates her from Nigerian citizens in her originate country. The novel utilizes a witty and sarcastic language, which adds a particular charm to the novel. This comes across particularly when we hear about Ifemelu's blog posts. An example of this could be in the very beginning of page 5, when it says, "Not all dreadlocked white guys are down." The language reflects Ifemelu's view on the world, and more specifically her standpoints on feminism, racial segregation, integration, and assimilation. Her choice of witty yet deliberate words discuss relevant subjects in a comprehensive manner.
So we find that the message of the novel, or the first part of the novel, relates nicely to the last part, or the last sentence, which is a peculiar case of a non-American black, or how the pressures of immigrant life can make you act crazy. And this is one of the titles she would have chosen to call one of her blog posts if she still had her blog. And as for the themes of the novel, we find that the three main themes in Americanah are racial segregation, cultural differences, and love. So while the novel is a tale of individual characters, it is also a sweeping analysis and critique of race and racism in America and Nigeria. And we find that the novel is filled with Adichie's observations on the subject. So in Nigeria, Ifemelu does not really think of herself as black, but when she comes to America, she experiences that racism is a much more pervasive part of life. Ifemelu first truly discovers race and starts to consider herself black, and only when she is forced to adapt to America's complex racial politics. So most of the novel's discussion of race involves pointing out racism and humanizing it, and this is both the victims and the perpetrators. However, Adichie also gives some examples of people overcoming racism through close relationship and romantic love. So moving on to the methods we've used, one of the methods we've used is the biografisk model, or method, in order to make the connection between the author's background and the influence this also has had on her writing. So Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which is the author, was born and raised in Nigeria, and she visited America for the first time when she was 8 years old, and later when she turned 19, she moved to Philadelphia to study. So her own experiences is the base of this novel, which tells us that it was written with her subjective influence. And furthermore, her attitude is very personal, as she is writing about old-fashioned love story, race, and reinventing ourselves. Then quickly going over the social history analysis. So the novel very much touches upon discrimination and race differences in America, which we can, for instance, see in the sentence, "You're hot, but you're from Africa," which is stated in the novel. And this relates very much to the society today, where we have the same issues and still experience the same racial segregation to some extent. In regards to the methods, we can also look at the main character from Freud's psychoanalytic theory of personality. And Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory of personality argues that human behavior is the result of the interactions among three component parts of the mind: the ID, ego, and superego. So the ID is concerned with instant gratification of basic physical needs and urges. The ego is the rational, pragmatic part of our personality. And the superego is concerned with social rules and morals. And this is similar to what many people call their conscience or their moral compass. So in respect to the main character, Ifemalu, her superego is important in the context of her perception of herself as an American individual living in the American society. So in Nigeria, she has acquired a stance in connection to norms, values, and ideals in respect to her culture and native country of residence. And during the novel, we're being introduced to these stances through small comments and viewpoints, which is especially emphasized with her blog, where she writes down her thoughts and observations about American blacks by a non-American black. So, for instance, as stated in the novel, he wanted to know what she meant by lifestyle blog, and she told him, expecting him to become